This is a heartbreaking story of a 22-year-old Nigerian girl who was set ablaze by her Nigerian boyfriend allegedly in Ghana. The lady in the picture is 22-year-old Judith Nwede, an indigene of Delta State. Few weeks ago, she reached out to INTRIGUE-CREST to share her true life experience, her ordeal in the hands of her Nigerian boyfriend in a strange land. According to Judith, it all began in the year 2021 when she left Nigeria for Ghana to do hookup business. As a result of her mother's ill health, she needed to raise money for her mother's treatment. So she went into Ghana to do hookup. Even though she was in Ghana to do hookup, she had an older sister who was married and residing in Ghana. Judith made it very clear that her elder sister was never in support of her business in Ghana. According to Judith, she moved into Ghana in October 2021, and in November 2021, she met a young Nigerian guy called Moju Bernard. Moju Bernard had picked Judith during one of her days of street business, took her home, and somehow they got talking. Bernard was said to have asked Judith why she was doing that business in Ghana, and Judith opened up to Bernard as to her mother's ill health. Bernard told Judith, in her words, that she should stop the hookup business and that he was going to start up something reasonable for her as soon as his client pays the money he was expecting at the time. She said that Bernard also promised to take very good care of her and to sponsor her through her education. For some reason, Judith has so much faith and confidence in this young Nigerian man she had just met. Maybe because he happened to be from the same country as herself, and so she believed every word that he had told her. Judith said she had the opportunity of living alone in the apartment she was living with some Nigerian girls because the Nigerian girls had left Ghana for Nigeria. As a result, her boyfriend Bernard moved into the apartment to live with her. Together, they both lived for over 5 months. But she said that after her boyfriend got his own apartment, she left her apartment to join him in his own apartment. And that was when she began to notice some changes in her boyfriend's attitude. Her boyfriend would talk her down in her own words. He made her to feel so worthless, as though she had no value whatsoever, and that he would abuse her physically, beat her up. He stopped her from dressing well as a young girl. He made her to wear a very big jumpers and a massive t-shirt day in, day out. He told her categorically, in her own words, that he would not hesitate to kill her should he see her with any other man. Judith said this young man she had fallen in love with subjected her to series of domestic violence. Talk about the physical violence, the emotional, the psychological violence. She said she went through all of it all in the hands of Bernard. As months went by, Judith had to return to Nigeria at some point to see her sick mother, and when she returned, she noticed that she had missed her period. Her mother, who was much more experienced, had also noticed some changes in her looks, and the mother asked her questions. But she opened up to her mother that she was in a relationship with a young Nigerian man in Ghana. Her mother spoke on the phone with Bernard, her boyfriend, and Bernard told her mother that he was coming into Nigeria soon and he would come over and see her. That was the discussion Bernard had with her mother, but to her greatest surprise, when Bernard came into Nigeria, he failed to call her nor even visit to see her mother as they had discussed on the phone. She said all of that, the change in Bernard's attitude, made her to have a second thought about the relationship she had built with him within a short period of time. Now, for fear of being abandoned with a child she couldn't take care of, Judith said she was left with no choice but to go for an abortion, and so she got rid of that pregnancy. After she got rid of the pregnancy, she returned back to Ghana to live with her older sister. But as soon as her boyfriend got wind that she was back in town, he rushed back to her sister's place, pleading with her to come back into his home, that he had changed and he was going to be a better person. You know what they say about a woman in love? She fell for that trick and she went back with Bernard. Thinking that things were going to be better this time around, unknown to Judith, she was in for the worst journey ever. According to Judith, it appeared as though Bernard increased, doubled in size, the ill treatment that he had once meted on her. This time around, it was in quantum, as he never ceased to beat her up, to abuse her, and put her down emotionally, psychologically, and otherwise. She said she felt valueless. She lost her self-worth. She lost her confidence. Even physically, she put on so much weight because she was depressed. She was worried about her mother's ill health, but she couldn't go on the street to hustle and raise the money that had made her to go into Ghana in the first place. She was stuck with a boyfriend who had made so much promises, with none of them fulfilled or even in sight of being fulfilled. And so all of that drove her into a state of depression. In summary of all that Judith told us, as time went on, her sick mother unfortunately gave up the ghost, but she did not die without Judith returning to Nigeria to be with her and share a few moments with her. Judith was already in Nigeria to see her sick mother when her sick mother gave up the ghost. It was now time to prepare for her mother's burial. And so few weeks after her mother's death, Judith again returned back to Ghana. This time around, she was determined to do all it takes to raise money for her mother's burial. But no, that plan was not going to see the light of day, as Bernard went back to her again, pleading for her to move in with him, and he was going to be a better man to her. Judith again fell for that trick, returned back to Bernard's house, and it was as though this time around she was in a cage without sight of light. Judith had hoped that her boyfriend Bernard was going to raise money to support her for her mother's burial. And so as days went by, she kept hoping. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months, but nothing was forthcoming from her boyfriend, who had stopped her from hustling on the street but was unwilling to support her for her mother's burial. At this point, Judith was even much more depressed than she had ever been, because her older sister, who was residing in Ghana, and the husband had relocated back to Nigeria. She was left alone in Ghana, thinking of how to raise money for her transport fare back to Nigeria to bury her mother. But luckily for her, her brother was. At this point, Judith was even much more depressed than she had ever been, because her older sister, who was residing in Ghana, and the husband had relocated back to Nigeria. She was left alone in Ghana, thinking of how to raise money for her transport fare back to Nigeria to bury her mother. But luckily for her, her brother was able to send her money to transport herself back to Nigeria in order to attend her mother's burial. Judith made it back to Nigeria to pay her mother her last respects, but she felt so bad that she could not contribute a dime for her mother's burial. After Judith returned to Nigeria and buried her mother successfully, she decided to stay back in Nigeria, more like starting life all over again. Her said boyfriend Bernard had blocked her on WhatsApp and other social media platforms. It was more like they had decided to stay away from each other. But few weeks after her mother's burial, Bernard unblocked her on WhatsApp and began chatting her up again, asking her to return back to Ghana, assuring her that he was going to do better by her. At this point, I'm thinking, what happened to once bitten, twice shy? Maybe it doesn't apply to all, right? I guess that. Judith, who already had fallen in love with this young Nigerian man and had fallen in love with every of his words, again fell for his trick one more time. Judith this time around decided to return back to Ghana without informing her older sister or even any of her siblings. She quietly picked up her luggage, returned back to Ghana to be with her boyfriend Bernard. When she arrived at Bernard's house, she saw his window open and she decided to peep through the window, more like she wanted to surprise him. But to her greatest shock, Judith spotted her boyfriend with another girl in the room. That obviously got her upset and disappointed. She immediately left the house without even saying a word to Bernard. And so Bernard did not even know that Judith had arrived, let alone see him with another woman. Judith's plan was to go to the Nigerian girl whom was introduced to her previously by a stranger in Ghana. And so she went straight to the lady's house called Elizabeth. When she got to Lizzie's place, she saw one of her boyfriend's friends who asked her when she returned to Ghana. She told him she had just returned but couldn't stay at her boyfriend's place because she had been there but saw him with another woman. The guy was said to have quickly called Bernard, and Bernard asked him to stay with Judith, not letting her out of his sight, that he was coming immediately. Judith said when Bernard got there, he got on his knees, pleading with her to return to him, assuring her again he was going to do better. She went back to Bernard's house. But guys, this time around, she was in for more like a journey of no return. But let's see what happens. Judith moved in with Bernard once again. This time around, it wasn't only Bernard who degraded her with demeaning words. His friends did not spare her. They would together abuse her, call her a gold digger, put her down. But she said she doesn't know why they kept calling her a gold digger, because it was not as though Bernard had money or was even giving her money. So she kept asking herself, what exactly was the benefit, the essence of that relationship in the first place? This time around, Judith decided to do a truth-based analysis of the situation that she was in, and she decided to tell herself the truth. The truth she had told herself was that it was time to leave Bernard and leave for good. And so she said she picked a few of her clothes, put them in her bag, preparing to leave Bernard's house and his life for good. But on that fateful day, the 5th of December 2023, after she had packed her clothes in her bags, it appeared that Bernard noticed what she did and suspected that she wanted to leave him. Judith said she was lying down while Bernard and his friends were about going out, and while they were leaving, she heard Bernard's friend locking the door from outside, and that made her to wonder why he was locking the door from outside, as against their usual practice of calling her to lock the door from inside whenever they were going out. But she didn't bother much. She just continued to lay right where she was lying. Few minutes after Bernard and his friends left the house, Judith said she began to smell something burning, and a sound was coming so fast. When she raised her head up, it turned out that the carpet, the rug, was already on fire, and the fire was moving so fast. She jumped off the bed, picked up her bag, which she had already packed earlier, and she opened the inner door, threw the bag into the sitting room in an attempt to jump out of that room to the sitting room. But she fell down in the process, and the fire caught up with her. She said she was able to get up eventually. She struggled to open the door. She ran out, but not without that fire burning some parts of her body. She said when she ran out of the house, she went to a kiosk nearby, and she told the woman that Bernard's house was on fire. She said that nobody was willing to rush her to the hospital, and she was already in pains from the burns that she had sustained from the fire. And so she quickly stopped a taxi and rushed to the hospital. At the hospital, Judith said she lied to the doctors that it was a gas explosion. Judith said on her way to the hospital, all she could think of was that Bernard and his friends set the house on fire to burn her to death, because they had sensed that she wanted to leave the relationship, but they didn't want her to leave. They wanted to silence her. They didn't want her to speak up, and so they set her on fire. So when she got to the hospital, she told them that it was a gas explosion, because if she had told them her suspicion of her boyfriend being the one behind the fire, they would require a police report, and that would take her a lot of time to get one before they could commence treatment. She said the pain she was feeling did not permit her to tell them exactly what she suspected. So she told them it was a gas explosion. She was referred to another hospital where they began treating her. When they asked for her relative, she told the nurses to contact her sister via TikTok, because she had sold her phones days before the ugly incident, because she needed to raise money to return back to Nigeria. Unfortunately, at the time the incident occurred, she didn't have anybody's number to call, and so the nurses reached out to her sister via TikTok. But the sister was not online, unfortunately, until 3 days later when she got online and saw their messages, and then she began responding. She was said to have contacted Judith's boyfriend in Ghana to tell him that her sister's condition was life-threatening and that he should make effort to go see her in the hospital. Instead, Bernard and his friends allegedly blasted Judith's sister and even threatened her, saying that Judith was the one who set the house on fire and that she should get ready to pay everything about the house to the landlord. Eventually, Bernard visited Judith in the hospital. When he asked if his friends could visit, Judith said she said no, because she didn't trust that his friends would not rally around and finish her up in the hospital, and so she told the nurses that no one should visit her in the hospital. She also recounted an incident when Bernard beat her up to a pulp, and in the hospital the doctor suspected domestic violence, and he asked her. She told the doctor what actually happened, but the doctor wanted to report to the police to protect her, but she was scared for her life, that she was in another man's land without family members, and her boyfriend and his friends could silence her in a way that she would never get to tell her story. And so she told the doctor to let everything slide. Judith went through a whole lot of pains, went through excruciating pains in the hospital, going through treatment for the burns degrees that she suffered in that fire incident. After she was done being treated, she found her way back into Nigeria, because at this point, she knew that she needed to run for her life, for her safety. And so Judith returned back to Nigeria. Now she is ready to tell her story, because she said that she couldn't speak up in Ghana for fear that her life was in danger. But she needs to tell her story to save other young girls who may unknowingly fall victims of her boyfriend's or now ex-boyfriend abuse. She says she's doing this to save innocent girls, to protect them from falling victim just the way she fell victim. And this is why she has decided to tell her story. She's calling for justice, that justice be served, because according to her, Bernard Mojui is working a free man in Ghana despite all that he did to her. We have related this story to different analysts, and they have analyzed the story, and they've all expressed dissenting opinions, as you would imagine. Some of them were of the view that Judith went through a lot in the hands of Bernard, and nobody should be subjected to such degree of torture by the ones who claim to love them. This group of people are saying they agree with Judith that she deserves justice for all she was made to go through by a Nigerian guy in Ghana. Now, while this group of people completely agreed with Judith's call for justice, another group of analysts are of the opinion that they do not understand how Judith thinks she can get justice in all she has narrated. Because according to this group of analysts, Judith could have spoken to the relevant authorities in Ghana when she had the opportunity to do so. At the time she was in the hospital, that was a good time to open up on the abuse she suffered in the hands of her boyfriend. But she concealed all of those, even though she claimed it was for her life's safety. Now, this group of analysts are saying, how is she going to prove to anyone that what she's saying now is what actually happened, as against what she had earlier alleged in the hospital? Another group of analysts are questioning the validity of Judith's story, because this group of analysts are saying they understand the dangers of a one-side story. That even though Judith has owned up her truth, she has told her story, but they are also interested in hearing the other side of the story. They are saying it is important for them to hear Bernard's side of the story before crucifying him, before casting any stone on him, because Bernard may have a different narrative from what Judith has said. Generally, this group of analysts are asking for substantial proof of domestic violence. They're asking for substantial proof of all she alleged against her ex-boyfriend, Moju Bernard. Sincerely, Judith's story is a very, very heartbreaking, pathetic story. We saw the videos she sent to us, the gory videos when she got burnt in that fire incident. We saw the videos, the pictures of her in the hospital. Those pictures are too gory that we couldn't upload them in these videos for fear of TikTok taking this video down in order to comply with the community guidelines. But trust me, we saw those videos and they were heartbreaking. Currently, Judith still has scars from that fire incident, and she opened up to INTRIGUE-CREST that she has been going through series of depression because those scars keep reminding her of the abuse she had to endure, of all she had to endure in that relationship with Bernard. Those scars are reminders daily for her to call for justice, to ensure she gets justice for what her ex-boyfriend did to her. So guys, if you've watched the story thus far, I would love to know your thoughts on Judith's story. Do you think that Judith deserves justice for all that her ex-boyfriend did to her? Or do you think that it is too late to get Bernard to account for all he did to Judith? Kindly put your thoughts in the comment section. I would love to read and engage. We sincerely want to commend Judith's boldness for coming out to tell her story. Despite the fear, despite the pains, despite the trauma, she is still going through a lot from the trauma she suffered from this single incident. Judith did not hide her story, even though she knows there will be people out there who would bash her for her truth. But she was bold enough to tell her story without any filter. She said it from the onset what exactly she went into Ghana to do. She did not hold back the truth. And we're hoping that there will be people out there watching this video who will be willing to empower this young girl with any skill that could take her out of the street life, any skill that could empower her to do better for herself, to forge ahead decently in life. In the meantime, guys, take care of yourself, take care of your emotions, take care of your mental health. Be kind to yourself, be kind to the people around you, and always stay safe. I remain Dorcas Ige Olukun, and I love you guys.